Okay, let's check it here on the next stream. Let's go over here. Let's go to Mere Models Podcast. Let's see, are we live?
Are we live?
Can you hear us? Hey, hey,
Oh,
hey, 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 hey.
are we heroes?
Yep, alright, looks pretty good. Alright, need to bring this up. Mere Models 344.
Today's Wednesday. Man, today's already Wednesday. Man, days are just
course it
flying
is.
by, dude. Flying by.
Right, this is set up. Edit, preferences, audio, hardware. Yeah. Right, one, you are running this one. You ready? Ready to go?
Ha, let's do it.
Here we go.
We all can be mortals.
Welcome back, Mere Model Lights 2, an edition of Musings. Musings is a chance for us to dissect a particular idea, thought pattern, perhaps things that, we've been pondering over, and we go, yep, we're going to get deeper than we normally would. You got one on this side of the mic.
Kyron here, this side.
This is our second session for the night. There was monthly goals before, so if you're tuning in live,
Yes.
Thank you very much for tuning in. Once again, a reminder, we do these live 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, not daylight time, Eastern Standard Time here from Brisbane, from Queensland. And look, I'm going to get straight into it. The idea I want to talk to you about, Karen, was one that our friend Nitin posed to me a few weeks back. And he, in fact, posed it to me.
Just to you, or?
He posted just to me at 5:10 in the morning, I believe, at the gym while I was warming up doing my chest.
Yeah.
And as he said it,
Nice.
I went, oh, I like that. I even paused him. I was like, wait, I need to write this down. I like this idea. I think we started talking about it a little bit when we grouped up with the guys not too long ago. But the idea is just really to ponder, what will generations ahead of us look like? What are going to be the changing factors, the differences? Now, for me, I guess why of interest so much this piece is, let's not focus so much on the generation ahead. So I'm not talking about if you were to have a kid or people who are being born now and in the next 10 years. I'm not talking them. I'm talking, let's go another generation beyond that. So I was trying to find a definition of like generational length. It seems to be between 20 to 30 years. So let's just say 60 years time. And here I'm not focusing on saying, hey, what will the world be like in 60 years or like in 2080? Not particularly saying that, because you can go into many different ferrets of ideas and thoughts. More so it's, what will the generation as a whole be like? What will they exhibit? What are some things that we can start to see that perhaps seeing the symptoms what might be some of the roots that start from our generation or some before, that'll become the symptoms that you see there. And I just thought, it'd be an interesting thing. For me, interesting because, one, from an investing vehicle, perhaps you could start looking towards what the future really looks like. So, I sometimes believe that, let's call it out there, something like Bitcoin, right? If you have a true thought that, Bitcoin's going to be X, Y, Z, and you think it's, one, a good investment, or two, good for the world, you might be, okay, how will it be good for 2 generations ahead of time? So I like that kind of thinking, the kind of play on the mind. It kind of focuses me on the long-term game, because you're not just thinking 5 years, 10 years. You're thinking on a broader scale, maybe 60 to 90 years time. And you kind of go, okay, well, what's those generations going to be playing out in?
Is that even worth thinking about, would be a question that I have. Because how many things from 90 years ago are even still relevant today? Is that just too far? So that person might have been thinking about.
Well, I'll say yes.
Train infrastructure, which is kind of relevant, I guess, but it's not. It's certainly not that important.
Absolutely, and I think the relevance there, and what I think would be a good discussion, is what is going to be relevant and what isn't. Like, I think that conversation is an interesting one, because it plays a part on what's important and what isn't. Right? Like, I think some of the things that electricity. Right, electricity in its major format now. Okay, it wasn't 2 generations ago, so I'm like kind of looking back a bit as well. Electricity from a generational perspective, right? It's still around, it's still something that we utilize. And holy hell, would we have expected it would have that much change in the ability of what we utilize? maybe not, maybe something that we couldn't have predicted, but I in my mind I go, oh, okay, it's still around now. Of course, it's going to still be around, but is there something else that we're going to find that in 2 generations' time, it'll now become what we feel is commonplace? But for us, we'll be like, wow, that's a humongous change. That's a pretty brilliant thing.
Yeah.
One of the things I was listening today from Peter McCormack in What Bitcoin Did, when they were saying that Bitcoin is like the biggest thing to happen in our generation. And again, I kind of think, well, is that an idea that in 2 generations' time, it'll be like, of course it is. That's like as much as electricity is. It's just like a commonplace thing that's utilized as a whole generation. And so I think there's a lot of different topics and thoughts that we can go down to, and being like, try to ascertain, like, is it important? Do we feel like it might be important? Do we not? And so I thought, yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to kind of talk about.
All right, just have to be sure that we don't get stuck up talking about future technologies rather than the topic, which was generational change, unless you want to change it up.
Well, and so yes, stick to the, I'm not focusing here on technology. Like, I'm not saying I want to talk about, is it going to be an iPhone 52? Is it going to be a new iPhone? No, nothing of that. I'm talking more some foundational things, some foundational items. So I want to kind of focus on that.
Kick me off with what you want to start with.
Okay, so this one came out of the blue, really, because I have quite a few notes here. Of just like, these are just more like pondering thoughts to talk through.
Sure.
So really, this is going to be a real philosophizing type of conversation. So I was hearing a conversation of, I think it was still with Peter McCormack's podcast, where they were talking about immortality, or at least the whole mindset of living slightly longer, and that kind of got me thinking of 2 generations ago, or maybe more, the life expectancy was lower, right? Now, what it would have been, maybe it was 50 years, something like that, right? Maybe 60% of what we are today.
It still would have been high if you'd lived. So yes, the average, but child mortality was way up. So
So
people are still living probably
longer,
75, 70.
Yeah. So there's
it's not like they're dying dead at 50.
Yeah, but there's potentially been an increase, but maybe not not a huge jump, but there's been a slight increase. And at least my question to you is, do you think that in 2 generations' time, there's going to be more of a thought towards immortality, or the thought of wanting to live a longer life generally as a generation?
No. I think that just happens. I don't think people will think about it more or less than they did previously. That fountain of youth type ideal, that's been around as long as humankind's been, and it pops up everywhere, whether it's the actual Spanish looking for the fountain of youth, or it's people doing rituals to steal the lifeblood of the young and put it in their own body or whatever. I think that idea of living longer and using technology or methods to do that has been a huge driving force for certainly many people forever. So I wouldn't have said there was more thinking about it. I think people would probably live longer. Yeah, I could see technology doing that, but whether they think about it more, I'm not so sure on that.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. So maybe
it would just become kind of normalized in a way.
Yeah. Or maybe just the same. It would still be a thing that's discussed and thought about by people, and maybe is supported by some technology, but it's still in the same way that it might have been many years ago. Yeah,
so it would potentially be if it was where adults are now seeing their children die before them from freak accidents, because that's how people die nowadays, instead of from heart disease or cancer or any of the other typical standard ones that kill old people.
Yeah.
And those have been sort of solved. So I could imagine, 1 or 2 feeling that, where they're in this transitionary period where, it was normal for their parents to die, but it's now not normal. Now it's almost normal for their kids to die before them.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But for those kids, I see that just being, everyone just lives ages.
Yeah, and so that one, I was trying to differentiate in my mind how to write it. So maybe the immortality bit, that's a good point you make. So probably not so much that they think more, but what about that current conversation that, like, say, Gary Vee says, where he's like, you still have time, you still have heaps of time, and maybe we're in this maybe our generation doesn't feel like that, but maybe one beforehand us did, where it's like, oh, I'm 50, I'm too old now. That's old. I'm like, at least me personally, I go, okay, I'm 30 now. I don't feel old. Like, I still feel like maybe I'm like 20. Like, I've still got like heaps of time. It still feels that way. However, if I got to 50, I start going, okay, I'm older now. Okay, there's a lot of things which have passed my time. That's time to more pull back, even though there's maybe half my life left. I feel like at that point, it's like, okay, there's some relaxation to a lot of things. I definitely see that, as you say, whether it's technology or the fact that humans are living longer, or just because we have the means or the ways to not die, basically, just so that in average people are living longer. I have this feeling, and I want to know if you feel that way, that our grandkids would just have this expectation that, being 40 is like now, like, oh, that's kind of starting to be a little bit older, but before then it isn't. Is this going to be like a thing where, you as a human, as an animal, really, there's a max age limit to humans as a natural form. You can enhance it with other things, but as natural human beings, you have a limit to it. That's just like natural human. Is there going to be like a mental shift with a generation that they go, you'll see 35-year-olds still having gap years and stuff like that because it's cool. It's like, oh, that's fine. I've got heaps of time.
Yeah, I could see that, especially because I think there was an age where, there was a time when if you were the age of 30, that was already, well, you've survived to a pretty late age, because most other people would have been taken out by a disease, or maybe not most other people, but a significant number, let's just say. So yeah, I could see the age at which people perceive you were old at extending. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think so. And then you'll see that a lot of my questions and a lot of my thoughts on this is how I would interact with such a question or with such a thing in that generation, in the sense that I think we're, talking it out loud. I'm sure a lot of these things will change, whether they're right or not. That's whatever. But I just imagine, I imagine talking to my grandkid, and maybe this is a better way of saying it, us talking to a grandkid, let's just say, for them to be talking to you and having this conversation of like, oh, I'm probably going to start my career when I'm 35 or I'm 40. That to me seems like a struggling type of conversation, because I could imagine that perhaps whether it's the shift towards being more flexible, being more casual for a lot longer in the initial periods of life, that I would struggle to connect with. Like in my mind, I kind of thinking, I'm like, oh, what sort of advice would I give someone like that? I'd say like, man, go hard when you're young. Like, sure, go and travel and do the things, but work really hard. Like, go after lots of different things. I don't think we talked about this with, I don't know if it was Joey or where we were talking about this, where, what's the one piece of advice you'd give? It was with Stephen and the team, when we were having a bit of a catch up, and Mum was like, try and experience a lot of things as quickly as possible and go really hard. Where I get this feeling that generation might be like, oh, no, I've got, it just feels like the time for them is more, maybe perhaps by the fact that people are living longer in a more general sense.
Okay. So, yeah, potentially. All right, I've got one for you, and this is related somewhat to what we touched on with immortality and whatnot. So I want a question for you, and maybe for people at home, is I feel there's a key assumption that's chucked in a lot with when people are talking and thinking about the generations to come.
Yep.
Do you think the ones that are coming up, they're each successive one, it's going to be harder for them because more things are going to be changing for them? It's going to be a more rapid mindset. They'll have to adapt more than any other generation that's come before.
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I'm going to say no. In some ways, yeah, that's an interesting question. My first initial reaction is no, because it's to their own domain, if you grow up, it's like, first one is like, okay, well, if you're growing up with a phone, right, and you learn how to use a phone, but your 80-year-old granddad doesn't, is it because you have the ability to pick up a particular thing really quickly, or is it just because you are in that domain of learning things when that thing is around? So I'm trying to be like, maybe not. However.
But what about, the person who gets their first phone when they're 25? Is that now in the hardest thing for them. Because generally when I hear people talking about this sort of stuff and imagining, the kids growing up, it's like, dang, it's going to be hard for them because they've got this just new stuff, and the new stuff that they get is going to be so out of this world, wild compared to what we had. Or maybe it's even, there's poor millennials. They're in this weird in between phase where there was internet, but it was shit, and then now there's really good internet, that sort of thing. I feel there's this assumption thrown that, oh man, technology is changing so quickly, it's going to be so hard for the upcoming. And I feel that assumption is not right. And I'm just going to say one of the hardest ones would have been for the people who, like, and I'm talking like a big generation here, so this is ages ago, and probably maybe even over 100-year period or something, where they had to confront actual new humans in a way. So there was questions of they'll see an African for the first time, and it's like, is that even a human? Or vice versa, the Africans, they come and they see these white devils who have the magic ability to, kill people from 50 yards away with a weird thing in their hand. And it's like, well, what the fuck is that? I feel like that exploring into the unknown would have been so hard to kind of grasp, rather than a technology changes now, which is, we kind of know, I roughly know what the life of a Chinese, person is like. They have their own customs and cultures, but I get it. They're a human. I kind of understand it. I've seen videos of them. I've seen things they've created. Whereas, so I would have thought the change of confronting new humans in that way would have been so unbelievably wild. Now, maybe you could say, oh, we'll find aliens, and that will be the biggest change for that generation, because they have to confront what that means at a existential level. But yeah, that's a big if.
That is a big if. And I think, let's just broaden it. I mean, like, if a huge thing occurs during the period of time for that generation, so again, I'm thinking like a grandkid, right, where aliens or something else happens where it's such a magnitude that it changes the way that you view things. I think as an old generation, I'm looking obviously forward in time, there would be some connection, but your lived life and their lived life would be so different that all of a sudden this becomes such an overwhelming thing, a point of a stressor, and that it might not compare to your existing life and the things that you've already seen in the past. So it would be, I think, as always, just a really hard thing to connect, whether you look backwards or you look forwards. Sometimes you can, I mentioned it, I think either one of us mentioned this on the podcast, when the train first came out, locomotive, and people were like, damn, if we go too fast, we're going to die because our body's going to liquefy and something like that. Now, that didn't happen, folks, obviously, because you're still taking trains and fast things and you're not dying. But just as hard as it is to look back and be like, I don't understand how the generation really thought that, and it's hard to pinpoint, what obviously was the mindset of the time, I think equally applies to the generation, like 2 generations time, where maybe the thoughts of a particular thing will just be so almost alien to us to be like, well, man, the troubles that I remember having is like technical issues about connecting the YouTube podcast or, doing this and that, when they're like, oh no, my bloody teleportation device here doesn't connect to my router here and I've got to write some Python. And you're like, no, this doesn't connect. This is what is going on. My
brain didn't connect to the cloud, and so it temporarily shut down. So I had to use one of my backup brains from wherever that I stored.
And here's the key reason I guess I mentioned the double generation, because it's an easy thing to talk about single generation, but it gets a little bit trickier in a double generation, because I think that the generation is influenced by the one beforehand, right? There's a lot of you're influenced by your previous generation in a lot of ways that you might not think, because if we think, even for us, the previous generation, there's a lot of music, there's a lot of we weren't really there for the beginning of the internet. We weren't really there for the beginning of a lot of the .com bubble. We were around, but we were babies, right? We weren't participating in it. But we're now participating in it, in the sense that now look at crypto, for want of a better word, blockchain and the like. We are the generation who has seen that scale, right? Now, whether that absolutely upheaves the existing, financial systems and the way that fiat money works, who knows? But if we see it, it would be like that understanding of being that generation there, we're going to pass on something to the next generation. So that's kind of how I see it, because ultimately there's going to be a massive influence there. But I go, for me, the interesting thing is, will we not be able to connect to the following generation if the generation after us, let's talk about like brain implants, right? So one of my points was, which I didn't know how far to get into it, was education, right? So you can broadly discuss that even right now. People go all the way from like education's broken to people should be homeschooled.
Man, people say that all the time.
All the things. Now again, I kind of say like, well, what's the better alternative? Go and say the better alternative. If you do have one, awesome. But it's probably a localized
they
thing, not a whole
should
thing.
teach X.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's you want to say that, and obviously it doesn't apply for the whole of society. But what if it gets to a point where let's just say that for whatever reason, mental chips in terms of knowledge and the like, not in the next generation, but the one beyond that is now readily available, and perhaps our next generation gets to play around with it, but then the following one on has some. Now it doesn't have to be a chip put into your mind. It might perhaps be the ability to uptake knowledge in whatever way, much more briskly or fast, just like a pill or chip or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. How does that conversation change your expectations of life? You might have an advice to say you should read, you should spend time reading, or you should spend time learning this particular topic or this podcast. But for this individual to say, or those generations to go, we don't need to. It's like you don't need to know things, but if someone asks you about it, you can essentially just absorb that information very quickly and pull it back out. To me, I go, that's probably one of those things. In the way that education, or maybe I had to say it another way, how you absorb knowledge will change in like a second generation. I could see that the way that you absorb knowledge, to the point that I think I will not understand. I will not understand that. Maybe because I'll be thinking in my mind that almost like the struggle and the effort behind learning the knowledge is like important. I feel like that will be lost if it is so readily available from maybe a young age.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a difficult thing.
Okay, well, there's kind of related to the same thing, but will it ever get to a point where you would say, oh, those future generations aren't human? They are now something completely different. So I was kind of thinking of, how to reflect on past learnings, and I'm struggling to relate some of them now for this one reason. So when I look back and I think, is the fountain of youth pure hubris? Can there ever be peace on earth? Does absolute power always corrupt? Absolutely. Can one entity control the whole world? That sort of, one person control the whole world. When I look at that, I say, probably not. At least in this day and age, humans are going to be humans. And with our things that we create, we're just doing more human things with them, i.e. killing people harder, faster, quicker, maybe creating more technology that allows us to do something harder, faster, quicker, whatever. And the only difference I see between us, I don't really see a difference between us and the Romans. We're the same people. Would there ever be a point where we can create something, a language, a technology or something that is just removes the humanness from these sorts of questions, and so that you could have peace on earth because the robots or the technology don't have that element of human in them, or the people who are using these things have just got such good barriers and guards in place that the humans can't fuck it up and destroy things. So yeah, with immutable code and technology, can we take the human out of our creations as well? So would future generations not have to worry about nuclear war or war in general or murder because they've taken the humanness out of the technology?
That's a good question.
It's like there's no ability to act like a human in all the And I'm thinking mostly of the bad ways here.
Yeah,
But, you know, it could apply to the good ways as well.
Well, I wanted to. I was quickly just doing this Google now. I haven't fully read into this, but you can Google it yourself if you want to go find the way. But they have taken a step, let's just say, towards creating human eggs from stem cells. So this is like genetically built human eggs from stem cells. Now, you know, again, while you're talking there of potential, what if you could, you know, impregnate this lab created egg cell to create a baby?
Hot.
All of it hot. This is the only way Karen's going to make babies. But you know what you find there is how human is that, in the sense of, yes, the original egg came from stem cells that were a human, sure, which has been modified and done to an extent so that it is you know, for want of a better, it's pretty much like, I don't know how percentage you'd say, but there's a great percentage there. It's been built basically.
Yeah, they'd come out still as a human.
No, and you're right. I don't imagine in the next generation that's to happen, because the next generation's being created now. So I don't see that. But you know, in a few years' time, and for the following generation, I go, holy hot damn, that might be a certain percentage of humans that are being created this way, just because it's easier. It might be cheaper. You know, if the damn. Imagine if
less destroying on the female
imagine
body.
If the impregnation and the birthing is no longer within the female body, right? It's just like in its own sac, right? We're creating the sac. It's just births it now. Now this might be wild, but again, that change up almost the conversation in a generation to be like, oh, are you human born or are you like sac born? You know, that to me is a pretty ginormous change. Again, one that I would go, I don't know how to me right now, if you said like that sort of conversation, I'd be like, nah, that's wild. Like that just seems inconceivable, but it might be. And I go, okay, that's something that maybe in that second generation, I'd go, there's going to be something to that. There's going to be, it might not be that exact question, but there's going to be some form of, oh, are you human or are you born from this other thing? Like, what are you? Like, you have to kind of be like, what are you really? Which I guess, I know we're jumping between a lot of points, but it kind of touches into this, not specifically.
Should we do the boostergrams first, or should we? How many points did you still have?
Lots. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay.
Yeah, do that one while you're on it, and then we'll do.
Okay. So this was. I'll pause it as well as I go into it, so maybe leave it tantalizing for the listeners to continue listen. But really, my view and one of the questions was categorization and things around, you know, about, will we still see the mentality of everyone needs to be a winner, and that idea, I guess, of the mixing of, you know, where are you a human, or are you like a sac human, or where are you from? And I guess I just wanted to converse about, you know, right now we talk about, you know, there's male sports, female sports, and then there's, well, now you were a male and then you become a female. Okay, so you can compete here, but what happens if you're, you know, if you're disabled? Okay, well, there's this disabled class and there's different classes that we go there, and I guess I just wanted to get your point of view on, okay, well, what happens if you're like, you know, you're genetically modified at birth, which people can do right now. Like, you can right now genetically modify a baby to change them to whatever way. Absolutely, in 2 generations' time, you better believe there's going to be people with money and power who are genetically going to modify kids or babies to the point that it's like, you know, an overwhelming, you know, advantage. Are they going to have their own, you know, areas to play in and participate in because you're just now like above the normal human population? Or are we going to just, you know, amalgamate and go, okay, it's time to just, doesn't matter anymore. It's kind of like if you put into a competition of people with steroids and non-steroids, like, fuck it, everyone just go for it. We'll just see who comes to the top. Let's talk about it after we look at the Boostagrams.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
So, Boostagram Lounge.
First of all, the chat comments got Joey kindly coming in here with a couple of chats, so we'll read him out. So he was saying, it's hard for me to answer, but what comes to mind is possibly families have had more time to build generational wealth, so it's possible that this sort of gap between the families who have built effectively and the families who haven't could become more visible. So I suppose that's more of a... Well, usually that tends to be a dystopian thing, because then we say, oh, there's people at the top with tons of power and money, and some people at the top, and then there's, you know, usually the vast bulk. What would happen if it was the vast bulk were the ones with power and money, and then there was just a couple of people
at the bottom.
What, man? That's actually an interesting one. Because then it would be like, oh, these people, they've they've gone back to the wild. They've thrown off the shackles of human civil. Like they are the ones with the
People
power
want to
now.
be like that.
Yeah.
There was a planned NASA like mission to go. I think it was just inspect, not to like retrieve information from an asteroid that's between Jupiter and Mars, I believe. I think it's something like that. Which the value of the minerals, the rocks that are on this asteroid, are $10,000 billion worth or something to like that. It's like something ridiculous.
Like more than GDP.
But basically, it was like if they were to like source every single material from this asteroid and bring it to Earth, everyone could be a millionaire or something like that. Something ridiculous like that. And I was like, that's so weird. It's such a weird concept. But any other comments from Joseph?
No,
Jojo?
that's it. So thanks for joining us, Joe, in the chat. Do appreciate
it, dude. All right, well, let's jump straight into then the Boostagram.
So do you know when to go until?
I believe so. I'm going to start from October 28th.
26th.
26th. Okay, cool. There's nothing there. Cool. Okay. So 28th. And we've got a familiar face, folks. He's back from the wilderness. Slav Petar.
I mean, he's probably Petar the Explorer now.
Peter the Explorer, yeah. Not Dora the Explorer, it's Peter the Explorer, folks. And he's come in hard. So let's get into it. First of all, he sends 7,777 sats using Fountain. You say money isn't everything, but I'd like to see you live without it. Aussie band, Silver Chain, 1995. You say money isn't everything, but I'd like to see you live without it. Agree. It's
great. Well, that's why we always have that caveat, or at least I do, which is, money. I know money's important. I know you need to.
Peter McCormick said today, and I kind of agree. He's like, money doesn't get you happiness, but it does get you fun. So at the very least, it's going to get you some fun. Like it's a short, you can get fun with money. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, fun isn't attached to happiness, but I agree. Yes, money isn't everything. But there are always exceptions to the rule. And if you're a peasant living under a bridge or something like that, and I hope you folks, listeners out there, are not like that. But if you are, it's a struggle. It's hard to live without it. So absolutely train from Silver Chain. Thank you very much, Peter, for that one. Then another one from Peter, 7,777 sats. Send again using Fountain. I really enjoyed the vaginas. I believe this is from the Vagina Wall from Tasmania.
Yeah. So I put one photo up. I thought so what I actually did was I blurred the kangaroo licking the asshole one on YouTube. Yep. So I was like,
come on, they'll accept that.
I doubt it. So I blurred that one, but I put that in our actual show notes as the real thing. But I left the vagina one as it was. So yeah, I didn't think it was too bad. I thought that was just like one sculpture of it.
Yeah, look, dude, there was lots of them where they came from too. There was hundreds of them on the wall.
Okay. So. Maybe he went and did some research on his own to look up, because I didn't put up a wall of vaginas. So I'm thinking this is Peter just
doing his own research.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Diligent man.
Another one from Peter, 7,777 sats sent using Fountain. He says, I predict you guys will be great as old men.
Well, Juan's already feeling it at the ripe old age of 30. So
I agree, dude. Today, obviously, I ran 8Ks yesterday, 3Ks in the middle of the day, 5Ks at night, plus a gym session. And this morning I went to go train, and it was like quite a lot of, not a lot of legs, but it was a bit of leg movements, and my legs felt like fairly sore. Like they were quite felt like lead. And I was like, okay, I'm just doing like a light jog afterwards, like just a K jog, easy thing. And man, my legs were feeling it. I was like, whoa, my knees, everything was creaking. So I don't know how great as an old man.
Well, you're going to be great at it. You've already got the complaining and whatnot down.
Exactly. Yeah,
someone in peak physical condition like myself, who's not even feeling the effects at age 30, it could be all of
7 reps today for the man himself, as the great old man.
I was struggling today, people.
So thank you very much, Peter, once again. Now another one from. Can you guess it? Peter, another 7,777 sats sent using Fountain. Damn. Now, Peter says, and I like this, Juan touched on a key point on character.
Of course you like it.
I believe people may develop what is referred to as character by enduring a hardship and then learning from it. in my experience, people don't fundamentally change who they are because they want to. They change because they have to.
Yeah.
That is, absolutely on the money. I agree. The changing of the character as a self-initiated thing is incredibly hard. You know, you're not going to go out there, as we talked about, you know, a great characteristic. Yeah, you're going to change it to being negative. Like, you're not going to do that. That is not going to happen.
Well, that one's kind of unrealistic, because I don't think anyone wants to lose things. But I'm thinking more of someone who's relatively brave. They'll fight off a snake from a random person, but will they stand up in the face of a regime which is forcing them to bow down at the behest of whatever, and willingly be a martyr? Would that person try and get that bravery without that situation happening? Would they build it to such an extent? I would maybe say someone like Jordan Peterson was someone who you could put in this level of, the reason he rose to prominence was because he worked on himself so hard that he was, when that random Canadian bill came up about you're going to have to, what was it? It was like you'll have to say Zerzy, that sort of thing. Yeah. Or you have to use this language. He made a big deal about it. No. And he got recognized for it, and he didn't need to put in all that work. So there's maybe one person I'd say. Yeah. Who's kind of, he put in the work when it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, perhaps. I would say the character is definitely, character is driven to some way, shape, or form by the internal machinations of a human, but it's certainly edged by the external actions that the world can have on you.
I'm agreeing for you for the 99.9%.
So Petar, thank you very much, but yes, totally agree. And here's another one from Petar. The man doesn't stop. He sends 5,000 sats using Fountain.
On a boosting spree.
I think you guys are both equally good at science.
So this was when we were... It wasn't a testy one. We've had testier moments where you can tell, especially watching the video, because you can see our face reactions and whatnot, where we've been
parents failing at the debate.
Just not at each other's throats, but definitely a little bit of like, fucking this guy. Like we're obviously sick of each other on that day. That day it was more funny. Like I was saying, Juan's fucking science is not so great. And then Juan was saying my it was a compensation for my handstands, but it was that wasn't one of the days where it was a bit feisty. That was a fun one. But thank you, Petar.
Thank you, Petar.
Appreciate it. I hope my science is important. Like the scientific method is important to me. I'm skeptical of a lot of science nowadays, but the scientific method, I think, is the big breakthrough from talking about generational change. That's probably up there in terms of a change to a generation who adapt and adopt that mindset. I think that would be a pretty big one.
I've got probably one that goes deeper than that.
Okay, cool.
Sounds good. Which like it stems from that. Then there's the famous Dave Jones, again with his weekly boost for the mere mortal light nation out there, folks. Yeah. David supporting you guys as well, obviously by helping support us. Yeah, that's 12,112 sats.
Check out Podcasting 2.0 to learn more about him and all the awesome stuff.
Yep, and finally,
you're gonna include it
today at 7:05 p.m.
We'll include it.
Proud mum of Liam F.
Oh shit!
Sends a message. Sends just boosting in to say, I'm just so overwhelmingly proud of my schnookums Liam F. 29 years of age, and he's packed his own lunch for work today for the first time.
Good on.
I love you, Liam. XOXO 1,200 sats sent using Fountain.
Liam's mum.
So Liam's mum.
You know what is impressive about that is that he still has the app, but he still knows how to do it.
Yep. So it's impressive. It is impressive. And those are the Boostagrams for the week. And look, that's obviously a big jump. Obviously, we're seeing big jump, Petar come in and just fucking get absolutely loud with his boosts. And again, look, it's these boosts which allow us to also be able to keep on contributing back to the society, the group, the membership, the members who participate in Podcasting 2.0. So I hope that you continue as well.
I swung him an extra 20k just this morning, just for and I even streamed to the Podcasting 2.0 in particular. And that Dave's been having this random thing where he's like, this person seems to be they're either boosting every minute on the minute 1,000 and something sats, or they've set their streaming level up to 1,000 and something sats per minute. And so he was like, I'm going to go and try and research this. So I did my bit of help today by setting it up to 111 by 4 ones, 1,111. And then I listened for 10 minutes, and then I sent another big boost in saying like, I just did this. So now you can see, did this actually show up or didn't it? Yeah. So there you go.
Very good. So thank you very much
on.
anyways for the
Lots of cool
Boostagram
things.
Lounge,
Yes,
folks.
everyone, much appreciated for doing that. If you want to know what a Boostagram is, I would suggest checking out the Podcasting 2.0 show. It's there's a real big section there where Adam does a really good job of explaining what it is. So check out, I'll say roughly around the hour to an hour and a half mark of that show, and you'll see what a full section of it looks like. Yeah.
Good. Now, you touched on a point on the scientific
method, yes.
Method and the like, and it got me thinking, why? Why would those generations be more interested in the scientific, method or the like? And I was like, does it stem from somewhere? I guess I went, will those generations, so 2 generations on, will they question things more? Will there be a more general propensity to question everything? 80 years ago, there might have been a very specific way that, hey, women don't vote. That's just how it is. And that's how it's always been.
Too right.
Hey, this is, how we do our sports. This is how we do whatever. And everyone being kind of content. And, there was a lot of people following really big propaganda-driven items. So we're talking,
just
Nazis,
maybe not even propaganda, just norms, societal norms.
Now, I kind of get a feeling that, in our generation, or at least the groupings around us, there's more questioning. There's more of a why. There's more polarity, perhaps, of left wing, right wing, different discerning views.
Why do you think there's more than there was previously?
I think that there's just now there's more platforms for people to be heard. So in the past, there just wasn't that ability to have platforms. You would have main speakers, which usually through newspaper, so it was very controlled, right? So it was centralization of media and propaganda or information. So it was very just one way. It was like you consumed it, and then you had a very local group that you were able to influence or converse about. That's how it went. We're probably at a stage now where there is, aka Twitter, the public town square. You can go in there and say whatever the hell you want, and you can probably get a lot of people that listen to you for worse or for better. So there's the ability for you to communicate with a wider population in the world there, and in turn probably allows more extreme views to appear, which then allows people to align to a more extreme view. If you don't know nothing about, a topic, let's just say about, horse killing or cows dying or something else, you might just have a very neutral view or not really have a view. However, if you're influenced by this more decentralized and much more different views and you go finding it, you're going to find something and maybe align yourself to a more aligned way. You might be like, okay, I really support that. Cool. Now I've moved a little bit towards that alignment, whether it's left, right, more extreme, less extreme. I don't care, whatever. And I go, will that trend continue? Will we see this trend continue where there's going to be, as we're talking about here, decentralization, the ability for anybody to really communicate whatever they want into the future. And so then have this, and I guess driven by this more questioning of why, or more of a questioning nature to them.
Mm-hmm. I would say the questioning sounds like it's the same in both of yours. So it's just now the ability is more there. Mm-hmm. So I would have said that a person from 500 years ago looking up at the stars or just going about their day-to-day job as a blacksmith or whatever, I would say they're equally as curious as people now, and I feel comfortable saying that because I would say that also people who are doing a brain dead job which doesn't promote curiosity, much like I felt with my old job working for Rio Tinto, that would just be the same. Like that, you could look back and say, oh, those brain dead people, whatever. I would say there's just as much now. So it'd be more around the effects of it, of being able to have those things. So I would say people are just as curious, what would be maybe interesting was they would maybe have a reflection of I'm little, I'm less, because you could imagine back then that someone's whole world, they were a pretty big part of whatever community they were in. You were the blacksmith in this small town. Hey, even in a big city, a big city of 10,000 people, that you could still get well known and still become top dog or top boss. Whereas if there's so many, everyone has their topic, their point. Sure, I'm sure people go towards extreme ends, like you've kind of seen with YouTube and stuff. But I would imagine that people in future generations would maybe feel, funnily enough, less empowered because they're just another voice in the sea. And in that sense, it would actually not be as great because you are just another drop in the ocean.
Just another drop in the ocean.
Whereas you I'm sure people had their bullshit views before and they could spout it off in their random city and whatnot, and it maybe wouldn't feel like, oh, I'm just another guy who does either believes space is fake, or I'm just another guy who's devoted his life to the scientific method, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So but in terms of curiosity, I would say unless people have more opportunities to do exactly what they want, which is perhaps true because technology is taking away menial jobs, which I don't. There's some people who probably love driving long haul, like that is their passion in life.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the vast majority of people who are doing long haul truck driving. I just don't see it.
Yeah, perhaps.
And the same for middle managers doing bullshit, looking after people they don't care about. Engineers like me who were doing designs for a dig that would like
daily planning, weekly planning, monthly planning.
If you look at everything I've created, there's just fucking empty space there now. There's either empty space or it's been dumped over by other shit, which was 200 meters that way, which has now been put 200 meters this way. That's not living. That's not living. That's not living.
That's like shit.
Rant over.
Little quick one. This is just a quick fire one. Thoughts on whether the second, 2 generations away, will they need to learn to drive? What's your feelings? What are your thoughts?
They won't probably not need to, but I think there'll still be enough automobiles around that people will want to, especially young men. I see, when we were in high school, talking about cars and skylines, and that made me feel, that was one of the only things that made me feel more of an outcast than than you would think of bullying or anything like that.
Yep.
It was definitely, I just had nothing to contribute to that topic.
I kind of think I'm like, there's still going to be some people driving themselves.
Yeah.
But I think there's going to be
four-wheel driving will still be a thing.
A good point. But I think that there's going to come a really clear delineation of society between those who have self-driving cars and those who don't. I think there's going to be a really clear line of being like, oh, do you still have to drive type of conversation in that generation versus the ones who don't. Like that's going to be, I don't know what the comparison is right now. It might have been, this is before our time slightly, but the conversation of maybe a few years before us of kids be like, oh, I've got a mobile phone, you don't, because those original mobile phones were expensive, right? They're really, really expensive. And not everyone had it. So it was like a sign of like wealth or separation. Now, I think that there's going to be a lot of that in that generation of, oh, you don't have a self-driving car? Like I've got a self-driving car, and kind of almost creates this big clique of generation of those who can have that and have whatever that bonus has and what does.
Sort of like what Joey was talking about, that gap of generational wealth being built up.
Yeah. And so here's a big one. Here's a big piece. So you might have heard of this before, and if you haven't, I'll try to sort of explain it. But there's a cycle that I believe does play out. The 4 quadrants of when there's good times.
Yeah.
Good people create good times. Good times create weak people. Weak people create bad times. Bad times create good people, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think the one I've heard, because it's better when you use just the two kind of opposites. So as Good. Yeah, maybe it was the 4. Yeah. Good times create hard people.
Yeah, hard. Good times create
Hard people create good times. Good times create weak people. Weak people create hard times. Hard times create good people.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So let's just say
we butchered it. But like I didn't add anything to that.
So let's just say that still holds true now. The 2 generations before us, roughly, or maybe 1.5 or 1, they were probably in the hard people, right? In the sense that there was world wars, there was big stuff going on. Obviously we talk about our own localized fact that we had the crash and everything like that. They had bigger crashes. They had all this sort of stuff happening in a percentage, in a scaled sort of view, right? So I would say, and people have talked about it from a historical perspective, that's probably the hard times. And so those hard times, that's good people. Let's just say in general, we could compare it as like, if I got to get an example, Winston Churchill, that sort of example where, they were good people in the sense that they put in freaking hard yakka to make things work. And by the by, it was probably those people that came out on top as being known people. Now,
so a little side note here. My dad actually creates good arguments that Winston Churchill was actually a war criminal and was arguably worse than Hitler.
And look, he did a lot of things. He did a lot of things that like killed a lot of people.
Yeah,
like he did like a ton load of things. But again, it's the perspective. He was on the offense to kill as many people and to stop Nazism and stuff like that. I guess I like those sort of debates where it's like potentially that is a reality. There was more kills done that way. Yeah. However, I think the saying that is. Not seeing it's like it's at a boundary. It's an interesting boundary because
half the reason my dad likes to say that is to stir up.
Yeah, which is good. I think the answer to some of those ones as well is it's the boundaries you set and the extensions beside that, because you could say perhaps that a known serial killer has killed a person and a person has by mistake killed another person. Now, rationally, you could be like, well, they've both killed the same amount of people. Like just say in that time period, okay, cool. But if they were to get out, there's probably a likelihood that this person's going to kill more people, whereas this other person who did it by accident doesn't. Now, it kind of applies there. I'm like, well, would Winston Churchill would have kept on killing people? Probably not. In fact, he got kicked out of office, by the way, after like World War II. Now, if Hitler was still around, would he have killed more people? Probably. So there's an extension to the compartment of time that you look at things that also differ. Yeah. But it is, you look at the facts, you got to look at the facts as well. But in any case, so it creates good times. Now, after those good times, let's say for whatever purpose, we might be in the weak times. We might be in the weak people, right? There could be conversations to be had around weakness within the current generations, post, pre, whatever. Where do you think it would land perhaps in 2 generations' time? And I'll give you my view. I think that an eminent person from the business side of things, which now is moving into like philosophy / historical movements. Ray Dalio, if you don't know him, go look him up. Creator of Bridgewater, hedge funds, and he creates some really good books. He came out literally today, to say that he, as he sees it, we're pretty close on teetering from stage 5 of historical life cycles, and he's looked back like thousands of years into stage 6, which stage 6 is war, like straight up war, some sort of war, whether it's full economical war or just straight up war. Now, you're not saying that
hot war.
Now, he's not saying it's going to happen, but that we are at the precipice of something quite close by a lot of the extensions of the ways he sees. So I'd say I kind of agree. I could definitely see in the next 5 years or so, something like that's going to happen. So, I'm calling it now. I reckon something like that's going to happen for sure. It might not be like, imagining this crazy thing, but, it's to me, it's not too far of a reach to say that what we've seen already from a global way is not going to continue. I sent you that thing about the bombers being moved into Northern Australia, Northern Territory. Literally the reason they're doing that is in preparation so that if there's an attack on Taiwan, they can quickly, re-attack from there. And there's a whole conversation and things that are coming out from China around how can they attack missiles directly into Australia, right? So, the fact that conversations like that are happening, I go, okay, it doesn't seem too like far-fetched if this happens in 5 years or 10 years. I could see that. Now, if that were to happen, I go, okay, we're in the period of really, weak people perhaps led to weak times or bad times, but from those bad times going to lead to some strong people. So I actually kind of see that the two generations on, so I think the next generation might be just absolutely walloped by it. But the next generation, I reckon there's going to be a lot of really great people, really like strong people that are going to come out from that particular generation.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I buy into that whole that cycle. It's an interesting one, but from the books that I've read and just in general human history, I'm not sure it's the case. I'm not sure it's the case that weakness is the reason that societies collapse and that war and things happen. You know, the people who fought World War One, they still seem pretty fucking hard. You know, it's not like that these random weak ass people then started randomly just fighting, and then it's like, oh yeah, these are all just like little pussies. And World War Two, that was where the real soldiers of hardship came from. You know, it seemed like both sets of cohorts there were fucking hard as shit, hard as nails.
Yeah, and maybe not the hardness, but then perhaps let's say another scale, the prosperity of a generation. So the prosperity of a lot of through the Great Depression and World War II, like it just as a whole, as a generation, it just seemed like a hard thing. It seemed like a lot of things were on their mind, a lot of things were happening. You know, if you ask anyone in our generation really lately, you know, what's one of those things globally that's troubling you? I don't know if people would, like your average person would really say anything.
They'd probably say something like climate change. But no, I'm not personally seeing the effects of it, because how many people are actually personally? Well, you know, the whole point of it is it's the kind of hidden, where we don't know it's happening right in front of us, and it's actually going to be in the sort of thing. So
I mean, ponder that one me more lights, because that's a really where you land on it. I think also helps you, perhaps if you don't have an answer to it. Perhaps it's because you're not looking at what's the reality of the world that's coming.
Yeah,
you know?
it's also what's the point? That would be my answer. You know, if there's a hot war between China and the USA, what am I going to do about it? Like, it's not. There's literally nothing I can do to prepare that will make my life better.
Man, your dad would disagree. I reckon your dad would disagree. I reckon he'd say there's things you can be doing right now to.
I'm unsure about that. I was asking about this recently, and he was saying he's doing things, but a lot of it was to make him feel like he was doing things rather than that he individually
truly believing that it's going to.
Now, there's a hard one, because I also believe it's the world is made up of individuals, and so individual actions can have a big impact or can have an impact. So this is where kind of two beliefs of mine are kind of crashing against each other. But yeah, honestly, it's not even a fun thing to contemplate. So if I believe it's not going to help and it's not fun contemplating it,
you're not going to contemplate it.
No.
All right. Well, this is my little final one that I've gotten here.
Okay.
Which I just thought it would be interesting as we were talking through. I just noted it down, which is who's going to be famous in that generational group? What's going to be fame? The reason I was thinking about this was you said scientists. You said scientists, and many hundreds of years ago, who are the big call-outs from past generations? And I'm talking now like generations of generations. And people think of Leonardo da Vinci, people think of, Tesla, people think of Albert Einstein, they think of Thomas Edison, right? People like that, humans. Does anyone think of like a clown or, someone who was like famous back in the 1900s? Maybe to an extent, maybe someone like a Marilyn Monroe or something like that, but that might be in the generations that were coming up. And obviously now we see who are the most famous people: sports personalities, movie stars, people who are influencers of some kind in the way of like a Kim Kardashian or a Paris Hilton. They're like the big known people. If you were to say on average, I'd say it's probably something like that. In 2 generations' time, who do you think is going to be the famous folks?
I look to history, and I'd say it's the same. the gladiators were the famous ones. The people who were famous for being famous, i.e., they had the power already, sort of, by dint of chance or by whatever. They were the famous. So I would say exactly the same types of people now. It's not going to be the hidden genius working away, or someone who's got a unique skill that has never been seen before. I think fame is, it'll remain the same. So it'll be the people who are the most entertaining, who say the wackiest shit, who that.
Yeah, my thought, and this is going to be probably one of those way out there ones. I go, what's the why? Why are people being popular in the past? You said gladiators. There's been scientists. There's been obviously now influencers and famous people. It's that keyword influence. It's influence and the ability to influence, or the ability to have people's attention, or some level of influence. So gladiators in a lot of the past, they were the eyeballs for, say, when you're talking Roman times, or you think of the stories, that was the influence. That was the thing that drew people in. Again, with scientists and there was creation of a lot of things that people are utilizing. So there's influence in the way that the things that they're creating, that they're generating, is influential to a lot of people. Today's world, they call them influencers. There's influential people who have got a ton of followers. And so then they have influence to whatever, sell something, create something, make a brand, etc. And then they get influence from that. I have a feeling that in 2 generations' time, and I don't know if the timing is going to be right, but do you believe, as maybe I believe, that Bitcoin is going to come in and do overtaking in some way, shape, or form of the current fiat system, right?
Something will happen, whether it is well known or whether it's just behind the scenes.
Whether it displaces the existing one, whether it's just behind the scenes, I don't care. But I for some views, see that in 80 years time, or like a second generation, it's not just going to be taught in schools. It's going to be just literally a new, what's is it? The Keynesian economics?
Yeah.
Yes, Keynesian economics in most economics places, and I think Peter McCormack was talking about this from what Bitcoin did, that, in a lot of economic places and lectures and the like, they just talk about that as that's economy. That's it. That's all it is.
Yeah.
But they've talked to a few lecturers who are now having the freedom to talk about a few different things, and talking about Bitcoin and talking to different perspectives. I have this feeling that by second generation, it's going to be a widely accepted conversation to be these are the varying ways that we can participate in the economical world, whether it's just a full change to the financial system or whatever, I don't know.
Okay.
But I go, what does that mean for Bitcoin? Maybe it goes up in price, maybe it doesn't. But, examples that other people have said is if you do create an ETF for Bitcoin and you have a lot more people participating in it, let's just say a lot more trillions of dollars going into the system. Now, that's fantastic for most people. Perhaps it allows, again, all of the good stuff that comes with the utilization of Bitcoin is fantastic. But where am I getting with the influential people, the popular people? Well, there's a few handful of whales who exist in this world who've got a shit ton of Bitcoin, right? I think there's someone with 400,000 Bitcoin. There's Michael Saylor. There's a few other people. And I go, if this system does indeed, as we're saying, take up and take shape and go all the way through and becomes really widely used, and widely used means also there's a lot of value in people utilizing it, which means the value of it goes up, then it kind of makes me think some of these folks are going to become incredibly influential in the sense that they're going to be more powerful or have influence on the system that's being utilized far above countries, and we see that today in some effect, how influential Elon Musk could be beyond what some countries are, because he's got a lot of worth and a lot of movement behind him. I go, well, some of these, if Bitcoin does indeed get a couple more $1 trillion into the system, there are some folks who are going to be incredibly powerful, influential, whatever you want to call it, with just how much they hold as a single entity. And I go, I think just by the sheer virtue of the influence that can have on a system, there's going to be some popularity that's going to come behind them. And I go, okay, maybe those to me will be the people who they'll be like, oh, those are the famous people or the popular people.
Yeah, I don't buy that as much. Mostly just because a bunch of them will probably want to remain hidden, anonymous. So, we still don't know who Satoshi is, the most
That's a good point.
famous, powerful of them all, with 1 million or 2 million in his wallet, whatever.
You can be anonymous. You don't have to be an entity to be famous. You know what I mean? Again, Satoshi Nakamoto. You don't know who he is, but there's a certain level of fame to him, right? He could, if he wanted to, he could come out, if he's still alive or not, or whoever it is, or it's a group, and make a comment. You better believe that person, like whoever does that, is like, wow, like people care about it. Like that seems popular. People would follow that. It doesn't have to be like an entity that you know.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. When I think of fame, I suppose fame is just really everyone knows this idea. It doesn't need to be a person. Like if you want to put it that way, fame is just as many people as possible know this thing. In which case, I would probably, I think I've talked about this before, I would say the most famous person is the one who understands consciousness the best, because I think consciousness is just attention and fame is just attention. So if I had to put one thing down, I would say it's the person or group who understands consciousness the best. And so whether this is someone who taps into the secret vibrations that are all around us and can do that sort of thing, whether it be people who understand how to create consciousness, so AI people create a thing that, I would say something related to that, and that's just because it's fame, attention, consciousness. What's at the root of all of it? Consciousness. Yeah.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there. I've got more. Well, I do have more questions, but I'm going to leave it because some of the other paths could get pretty gnarly on length of conversation. Yeah. Okay.
I'll do this just because I only had 3 points anyway. So I saw a little post the other day that did get me thinking. I think this was from Biology, and with birth rates plummeting in the Western world, can you actually have a change within a generation? So most people, when like this whole time we've been discussing, Gen Zs versus Gen Y versus baby boomers versus Stone Age boomers, fucking whatever they're called, versus sack people versus all that sort of shit. Will we ever see such a radical change within a cohort? So let's just say a group of 20 to 40 year olds, or whatever that generation is, that has been arbitrarily defined, which is so radical that it's like, holy shit, that was a change within a group, not between two different groups, but within a group. So in this case, what Biology was saying was there could be a change between people who are childless versus people who are parents. And so with Western birth rate plummeting, if you got to a certain point where it was 50-50 or something like that, and then people who didn't have children versus people who did, and how radical their viewpoints would alternate, perhaps.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think for sure that would occur, and I think there's going to come a point of inflection of I would have to go see the numbers, but at least the generations of there's the great generation, the silent generation, and the boom generation, and something like that, right? And I think each of them are like, it gets quite long, and they get shorter and shorter and shorter. So, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, call it millennials, and the next one now that they're calling, right? It's pretty constricted time. They go from like 30 years to 20 years to like 10 years, 10 years, 10 years. And I think there is something to do with the pace of technology, life-changing things that are happening, and it is quickening. I do think we're going to get to an inflection point where we won't even talk about generations anymore, because things will change and polarization will happen so much that it'll just be like that. You can just be like, almost yearly, you'll be like, oh shit, this changed so much that it's completely different, and it's completely different again. It's completely different again. So it's like, okay, we've now reached a point that it's going to split out, and within what you would call within the generation, it'll just be splits after split after split after split. And again, again, there's probably more technology, but whether it's quantum technology, bit encryption, whether it's AI being generated to the point that then it just goes even faster than humanity, then it's like, well, shit, do we have to keep a generation for computers and generations for us, because these things are just going like bananas, like just so ridiculously fast. So yeah, I could see that it would quicken. The changes would just quicken and quicken. Yeah, for sure.
Coolies.
Very good, very good. And yes, Immortal Lights, that has been our little deep philosophizing session on
A little one, man, it's getting long.
what the
It's a big
thoughts
episode.
of life looks like, for your grandchildren, basically. What would it look like having a conversation with your grandchildren, and what would be the differences in their life? So, any other questions in the chat there that we want to pull up? Or
Liam popped in, but mostly just to say hi, see what's going on.
Beauty. Okay. Well, look, we'll leave it at that. We'll tidy it up, folks. You heard through, and we already talked about this, but Boostagramming is the way that we do love your support. Or
this is the generational change.
This is the generational change.
Boost. Value for value. That's the generational.
Be there at the
right
beginning
there.
of the generational change when it comes to Boostagramming, because 40 years it's going to be in dictionary to boost, to support in a value-driven way.
It might sound crazy, but maybe not boosting, but I think the concept of value for value is so fucking powerful that I could believe that a slang term becomes I'm just V for Ving or something like that.
V for being, yeah.
I could see that becoming a word.
Yep.
The more I see, the more I'm becoming more certain of that view with each passing month rather than less certain.
So there you go. Karen's already skipped generations.
I'm there,
already
man.
He's already
gone. I'm way ahead.
He's way ahead. So if you want to get ahead, folks, what you got to do is, Boostagram through, operate in Podcasting 2.0 land, go through to Podcasting 2.0, any of the new apps there. Fountain, obviously you saw Peter handfully being using Fountain and sending through those sats. So, you might want to check them out, or you might perhaps want to be checking out some of the other ones. Customatic, Breeze, there's plenty out there. Podverse, go check it out. If you want to see how other players operate in the Value for Value space, we also have the Value for Value podcast, which Karen has done 2 seasons of as well, so you can go check that out and listen to them as well. But for now, we're going to tidy up the musings here. Thank you very much for listening all the way to the end. If you have, hope you enjoy yourself wherever you are in the world. For now, Juan out.
Karen out. Much appreciated.
Good.
Good.
Right
at the end there.
Hey.
Prentice was saying he was listening while tuning in. Yo, everyone. So if you're still here, like always, I'll be going into the Discord and I should be there for the next half an hour-ish. So if you feel like chatting, come in and join me.
And chat. Juan's
going to head off to...
I forgot to change shirts soon. I was like, fuck.
Oh, you brought another one? Yeah. I figured it wasn't important. I remembered it, but I decided not to do that. So yeah, if you're still hanging around, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Liam, Joey, Westside Baby, much appreciated. And yeah, hopefully see you for the next one. Come join me in the Discord. Peace.